Hello, this is Axum again with the Limited Deployment series. Today we're going to be talking about how should I tackle Maddening Lunatic for Fire Emblem games. This seems to be a hot topic in the community. Some people want to advance into those categories, but they feel either afraid or they feel that somehow their strategies are not going to work. And I'm just here to give you a couple of tidbits to try to help you get into that mindset of playing that highest difficulty, but in a very calm and relaxed way. I'm by no means the best Fire Emblem player in the world, but I've completed almost every single Fire Emblem on the highest difficulty, and most of these strategies that I've developed come from a couple of points that I'm gonna relay within this video here. Mind you, this doesn't work for everybody. These strategies are different, obviously, and each game has its own little niche that you can fulfill. Some strategies I might even miss out on. What I'm trying to explain here is how I get into the mindset of being able to tackle the maddening difficulties of any game. So, let's start off. The first thing I recommend is to play the game once on hard mode. Now, some people will say, why would you even do this if you're going straight to maddening? But the truth is, you can't just blind play it and expect fantastic results. There's going to be a lot of dying, a lot of things that are going to catch you off guard, particularly if you play completionist style like I do, where you want to get all the characters, everything that's possible, get all the chests, capture all the enemies, do all the side objectives, get all the cutscenes, yada yada yada. So realistically, playing it once on hard mode at least lets you see everything that's going on within the game. You can see all the chapters, you can understand the difficulty of the chapters, you can see what's going to come at you, which will prepare you later on to be able to adequately deal with the stuff that you're going to encounter in the game. An example of this is Conquest. Conquest hard mode is very difficult, very challenging. I'd say it's almost as challenging as Lunatic, but Lunatic has a little bit different stats and characters that are added in to specifically stop you from performing certain strategies. But if you knew what the map kind of looks like and you know what to expect, you can kind of react to it and deal with it. Radiant Dawn is the same thing. Hard mode Radiant Dawn takes away quality of life things, which is annoying, but the chapters are the same, and the enemy placements are roughly the same, but their bulk goes up by a lot. A lot of the difficulties associated to the harder modes actually revolve around the enemy bulk, meaning that enemies cannot be one-rounded as easily, right? This ain't Fire Emblem Heroes, guys. So it becomes a little more challenging to be able to deal with these bulks, and you have to kind of move your chess pieces around a little more efficiently. The second thing I want to say is understand the mechanics. Some games, you're going to utilize rescue chains. You're going to utilize rescue staves. You're going to warp to the objective. You're going to quickly beeline to the objective. You're going to be able to move your characters faster. Some games have people that dance for units. And that's important to know, because using these strategies allow you to be able to plan ahead and effectively tackle the difficulties of the game. Sometimes if you need to get to a spot really fast, it might be more efficient to just warp a unit there. Or let's say you're about to complete a map and the objective is kill the boss or whatever. So you go up to him, you're about to kill him, but you still want to grab that chest. Well, you can warp the thief over to the chest, grab the chest, kill the boss, and the map is over, instead of having to haul the thief all the way over there. So you got to kind of understand what are the mechanics that are going on here. The turn wheel is a mechanic that has been present since Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. And it's a mechanic in which allows you to redo a turn, or basically turn back time. This also rigs the RNG, allowing you to be able to kind of predict what actions are going to be successful hits or successful crits, and then you can utilize this to actually turn the advantage of the battle in your favor. Some people are going to say this is cheating. I really don't think it is. I think the turn wheel is an interesting mechanic that was added to specifically deal with stuff like same phase reinforcements that come in and just delete your units that have pass. Looking at you, Maddening Three Houses. Just basically dealing with that 1% crit that you didn't expect. Sometimes you don't want to have to redo a whole map if you're playing completionist style to just deal with that 1% crit. And I think that this takes a lot out of it, a lot of that frustration out of it. So I think it's a helpful mechanic. I think it's also important to know how to work it and how to work around it. Another thing that happens in Fire Emblems is, do you have a reclass option? Sometimes the main class for your character is not necessarily the best class. This happens a lot in Awakening, Fates, also happens in Shadow Dragon, the remake, New Mystery of the Emblem as well. Happens in the most recent Fire Emblems 2, Three Houses, Echoes even has a little bit of this. So reclassing is an important mechanic that's important to understand and to know how to work your way around. Maybe a character isn't performing well in this. There's also an option to reclass, and this is particular to Shadow Dragon. You can reclass a character every map. So why wouldn't you do this? The map has a bunch of people that have bows. Well, Sita's not going to be good as a flyer. Change her to a paladin and wreck everything with paladin and Sita. But wait, now we have a bunch of intransversable terrain to mobile units like horses and stuff. Well, change her back to a flyer. You want to see Jagan wreck some stuff? Make him a Wyvern Knight. You think your Lysithea is good as a infantry unit? No, make her a Mage Knight. Now she'll be able to get all that movement. So there's a lot of these things that you need to understand going into the reclass mechanics. Another thing is the pair-up mechanic. Understand how supports and pair-ups work. In every Fire Emblem, they have different ways of how they work. Some supports just grant stat bonuses if you're adjacent to them. Some supports grant incredible stat bonuses when you're paired up, like in Awakening. You also can use the pair-up mechanic, which paired with Crom is absolutely busted in Awakening since he increases the trigger rate of certain things happening to will attack. There's also a very important value in knowing the adjutant mechanics in Three Houses, or how the Fates mechanics works with the shield gauge and how it builds up and how you can split it and give it to somebody else. This list goes on and on, but the important thing is to understand how these mechanics work and how to implement them properly within your game. Transformation gauges? What do you mean, Radiant Dawn? Also, Path of Radiance transformation gauges are different from Radiant Dawn's. Also, Radiant Dawn on the highest difficulty doesn't have the weapon triangle. Understand the impact of the weapon triangle in your game. It's way more important in FE6 than it is in FE7. Why is that the case? Doing a little bit of research never hurts. I'm not saying you need to know all these things, but it's important to just understand it and to try to get around like, hey, what am I trying to do here? What's the, not the optimal, but what's going to make my life easier? Another important factor in Fire Emblem strategies is to understand, is this game a Juggernaut game or is it a player phase game? So basically, I'm trying to say if it's enemy phase or player phase based. A game that's very enemy phase based is something like Fire Emblem 7, the Blazing Blade. You have Hector that can just enemy phase most of the stuff in the game in the early game. There's a lot of enemy phase strategies involved because the enemies thrown at you are weak, pathetic, and they just get one-rounded by absolutely everything you throw at them if they have enough speed. The thresholds for speed are really low, meaning you can double pretty much everyone. Are certain maps enemy phase? Can I bait certain characters out and then rush them afterwards player phase? Or is the game purely player phase? Or is there a huge advantage in just purely player phasing things in that game? One of these examples comes to mind is Three Houses. Three Houses is a very, very player phase game. A lot of the game involves you rushing something really quick, getting to an objective before they can spawn the reinforcements, and then killing it super fast. I'm not saying it's the most optimal way to play, but it is important to understand that that player phase is there and you should take advantage of it. I would even argue that FE6 has a lot of enemy phase stuff, but there also is some advantage to being player phasing as well. Sometimes you want to player phase because it reduces the enemy density in your phase, and then you have to deal with less stuff. An example of this is, let's say you have your units, but they have 3 enemy units, and you know that any one of those 3 enemy units combined will kill one of your characters. But if you kill 2 of them on player phase, and maybe face tanked one, even with the mage, which is not optimal, you'll be able to survive, which means you reduce the enemy density and chip the next guy for the next round. This becomes extremely important later on higher difficulties. Do I need to bum rush this and destroy it, or do I need to take a second and take a breather? So understand which Fire Emblems and which maps you need to Juggernaut versus player phase. Awakening is a very Juggernauty game. You want to really just pair up and Juggernaut everything on the map. There's some maps you cannot complete if you don't do this, especially in the higher difficulties like Lunatic and Lunatic Plus. You want to make sure you're really trying to reduce enemy density so that you have less to deal with on player phase. Also understand how to position your units in such a way that you can cover the forts to prevent enemy units from spawning. Is an enemy unit going to come from this stair? Well, if I place someone there, it ain't anymore. So there is some value in maybe warping a unit to a ladder and preventing the units from coming. Something like this is very important, say, on the Maddening ending of Blue Lions. If you take the stairway in the middle right off the bat, they can't spawn the reinforcements that come from those stairs. So it'll prevent you from having to deal with more stuff, especially if it's same turn reinforcements. This is also important in Awakening. This goes on and on and on. You can have a lot of situations in which getting to a position really quick is important, which meaning player phase is important. The next topic I want to talk about is resource management. Resource management is basically the essence of what a Fire Emblem game is. We try to say it's like, oh, it's a strategy game, but really it's a resource management game. You're given necessary tools to deal with certain topics and certain challenges that come up. But how you spend those tools is what's important. Say, sometimes you get killer weapons. Which unit should I give it to? Should I give it to the unit that's weak and like is going to be able to protect himself a little more if I do that? Or should I give it to a unit that bodies everything, but if I give him the killer weapon, it's going to make sure that it's going to delete that unit? Well, the answer to this is subjective. No, it's not. You give it to the unit that can one-round something. Why? Because getting rid of enemy density is important. So if a unit can kill something in one round and you're not trying to set up an XP chain, you should let that unit kill it in one round. There's less chances of anything happening. There's less stuff you're going to have to deal with moving forward. So resource management is very important. Who should I give the promotion seals to? Is there a character that comes later on that is just as good as something not promoted? And am I going to invest in them? An example of this, why would I invest in Urk if I can get Pent later on? And I'm not saying Urk is a bad unit, I'm just saying Pent is a really good unit. So sometimes you want to be able to use that to your advantage. Am I going to invest the experience, the time, the gold, the seal that I could sell and make money off to actually transform him? Or am I going to just use Pent? This is something that happens a lot in Fire Emblem games. You have certain characters that are absolutely destructive. Sita is a powerhouse in Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, the remake, and she destroys everything that she touches. Why? Because effective weaponry is really important there. So managing your effective weaponry is important. How the effective weaponry impacts the game is also important. How important is it for me to be able to one-round something given the density of enemy units? That's another question you should be asking. So which units do I have that can tank all this stuff? Is Milady one of the best units in the game? Yes. When I get the IoT shield, or that version of it, what should I give it to? Should I give it to her? Most likely yes, because now she's able to deal with bows on enemy phase with a javelin, which nobody else can really do in that flying class, unless you're like Zeus. Even the Pegasus aren't nearly as strong as her. She's regarded as one of the best characters in the game for Fire Emblem 6. So understand that that's important. Like, should I be investing into Sigurd, even though I know that the barbecue is coming? Yeah, maybe you should. Why? Because Seliph will be really good if you get the stuff that comes from him. And also, he's there for half the game. So isn't it important to beat half the game? Soth is one of the greatest underrated units that I believe exists in Fire Emblem. People always go with like, oh my god, Soth just sucks because at the end of Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, he can't do anything. He can't really chip anything. Yeah, but what about the other 3/4 of the game? He was there the entire time. He was always assisting you. Which leads me to the next topic, which is use your main lord. Now this is a very, very hot topic. Some people think this is a bad idea. You should never invest into your main lord because your main lord may suck. We're looking at you, Lyn. We're looking at you, Roy. But the truth of the matter is, you're going to have to log this carried weight anywhere you have to go because it's the main lord. He has to be there. There's no way out of it. This character has to be involved, meaning that if it has to be involved in all of the chapters that you must deploy them, then you might as well make an investment. Lindis and Eliwood are a little bit different, and Hector for this matter on Eliwood mode, only because they don't have to be deployed. But I would even argue that you should deploy them because eventually having their presence there and their supports build pretty fast and they're pretty useful to have, especially Eliwood who promotes into a horse later on, and Lindis has access to bows, so it's not that bad to actually promote these units. Roy is garbage, like he's basically a carry the entire time, but I still invest into Roy to make him 20, at least before he reaches the point that he promotes, because he has to be able to survive. Do I always have to be worried about babying my lord? No, because I don't let that become an issue for me. I go and I train my main lord. He's always going to be a good investment for any stat booster I give because he's always going to be there, so why would I not do that? They will always be useful as a support bot, so say for example Alir in the new Fire Emblem Engage. Why would I give Byleth to anybody but the dragon, given that the dragon gives incredible support bonuses in terms of stats, being able to dance for people, and like it helps Alir out. He moves a lot. You have to use him all the time. You have to go up to things and you have to move him around. He's really good support bot if you think about it with his ring usage. So that's a combination of understanding the mechanics and understanding how to invest in my main lord. Marth can open chests. He has to be able to survive combat. Why do we not use him for that? Use him to open chests. There's just a lot of things that you can correctly tackle if you know how to use your main lord. Some lords are going to be great at combat, like Ephraim is disgustingly strong. Hector is pretty good. Ike, once he gets Ragnell, in both iterations, he basically destroys everything. Chris is really powerful too. And of course the Robin Crom solo duo are just disgusting. But sometimes you need to carry around a lord that's suboptimal or not that strong. And when that happens, I just advise you, like, don't look at it as a chore. Look at it as an investment that can't go wrong, because you have to bring him around no matter what. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of other little tips that aren't nearly as important as these that I brought up, but they're important. The number one is always have enabled enemy range. I laughed a little bit while I was saying this because sometimes people forget that they can do that in the games that you can do it, and sometimes a misplacement is enough to just have everybody die, and you're like, oh my god, no, how did Alm get bodied by this sorcerer or whatever? It's because you didn't check enemy ranges and you forgot. And when you forget about checking enemy ranges, you make mistakes and you die. Another thing that's very important is to use your dancer wisely. There is a reason why dancers are always, and this I won't back down on, they are always S tier. No matter what Fire Emblem iteration you're playing, being able to give another unit an action is absolutely fantastic. Some of them even have added stuff, like Ninian, who can make people get extra rings or whatever, and then they get extra stats, or they become invulnerable to some damage, or they get high crit. Or we're talking about Byleth, who gives stats and engage. They've been marrying Dancer's utility a lot more to other things as well, such as healing in the form of Racing and those guys. But it's just important to understand that the Dancer enables your best unit to move twice, or your warp unit to move twice, or your main lord to move twice, or your horse to move twice. It's just exceedingly broken mechanic that allows anybody to move a second time. And since you control this, right, it can basically dictate whatever you believe the best strategy is to use. You can use it with a Dancer. So be absolutely sure of always using a Dancer, and make sure to use your Dancer efficiently in every playthrough. What do I mean by this? Plan your moves with your Dancer before that. Oh, if I move this guy over here, can I one round him? And then later on I'll dance him again and move forward from there. If a game has a Dancer, know how to use it. On that subject, a little bit about map design. Understand the objective of the map. This has become very prevalent in Fire Emblem Engage. And I'm going to talk about this now because I just played it, it's fresh. But a lot of the chapters are like kill boss. And if the objective is kill boss, sometimes it's better to just bait the boss out fast as possible and kill him as quickly as you can. Or rush them really fast and kill them as quickly as you can. In the higher difficulties and at the higher levels of Maddening, you're going to see a lot of reinforcements being spawned, like to a rate that you're like, whoa, wait a minute, I can't one round this Dragon Lord. I couldn't even one round him with the units I had to gang up 3 on him. Why did they just spawn 6 more? Because they don't want you to fight it. They want you to rush B, get there really fast, defuse that bomb, blow up the enemy. Usually the boss is not nearly as strong as dealing with 6 Wyvern Lords. Fire Emblem 6 has that on the chapter that you have to fight Murdoch. You have to try to rush him quickly, trying to avoid the zones. You could also take a patient approach and deal with all the enemy wave reinforcements, which is fine, but some people find it more efficient to just warp someone in, kill Murdoch, and then warp Roy, seize the chapter. Boom, done. You also have a turn limit, so understand that the turn limit is important if you're trying to reach the paralogs or whatever it is. So side objectives, are they even important for you? Sometimes getting a chest is not important. There is one map in particular in Conquest that I almost always refuse to get the chest because it doesn't make any sense to get it, and it's Iago's chest, which is a chest on the left hand side of Iago's map that basically has a bunch of stone dudes covering it. Those stone dudes have massive range, hit like a truck, and have high accuracy. Why would I risk going the left side and destroying my units for a Yumi or a Spy Kunai or something that is basically a 3-range dagger when I already probably have a 3-range bow and it's not really going to help me that much? So is there an important objective to go get there? Yeah, if you're playing completionist, yeah, to say you did it, that's true, you could do that. But at the same time, there's no need to do it. And if sometimes the objective is, hey, complete this map really quick, you can sacrifice a little bit of gold to do it. Understand that experience is also a resource. You shouldn't just be wasting it. But that Jagans aren't necessarily a bad investment because they are already promoted versions that, yeah, they'll get less experience, but they're really strong. It's almost like giving a character plus 10 levels right off the bat. Titania falls under this. Seth is a god. Seth is the strongest character in FE8, and there's no real backslide to using him. Same thing with Marcus. A lot of your Jagans that are given to you are actually in disguise good units. Pre-promote does not always equate to bad, and that you should be using these depending on what your needs are. One little tidbit I give to you as well is focus on each chapter. What do I need to complete this chapter? Sometimes the biggest difficulty that you face is right in front of you. So do what you need to do to complete the chapter in front of you right now. If you need to complete it right now, and there is something that you need to invest into doing it, you should. More than not, the Fire Emblem games give you enough tools to deal with the stuff you have to deal with, even on the higher difficulties. And I want to say I'm not super liberal with stuff, like I'm not spamming the Binding Blade everywhere and Durandal everywhere. But if I need to use it to kill something, I'm going to use it to kill something. I'm not going to be afraid to use the Binding Blade because it might break later on. No, when it's close to break, then I'll start being conservative. But up until those 20 uses are up there, I'm going to use it. Same thing goes for any legendary weapon in a game. Another thing I say too, in regards to strategy, is sometimes scour the internet, see what other people are doing. It's interesting to see, like, hey, what does this person think about this unit? And like, you'll find some little mysteries that you didn't know before. Things like Fogado reclassed to a warrior has base 19 strength and 20 speed. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait, I didn't know that. I thought he just sucked because his class sucked and his bases were bad. Or units that have proficiencies that you kind of overlooked. Nime, for example, in FE6, she doesn't need to use Apocalypse. Apocalypse kind of sucks. But what she needs to do is be able to use that Berserk Staff, use the Warp Staff, use the Physics Staff. These things are important. Check out other people's strategies. It doesn't hurt. It's some fun ways to sometimes replay the game and be like, oh my god, I never even thought of that. What do you mean Battalion Vantage Wrath is so powerful and wipes the game? I don't understand. There are ways to break the game, trust me. I don't consider myself that good of a Fire Emblem player, and I know that there are a lot of people out there that can put me to the dirt regarding the strategies I come up with, and they can do stuff that I didn't even think of doing. And this comes with experience, obviously, but also really fundamental mechanics of the game that they understand to a very strong level. Understand the difference between growths and bases. Growths are good on characters that have a lot of time to develop with a lot of availability, but sometimes they'll get really good, sometimes they'll be really bad. So know how to utilize that coin issue to your advantage. For that matter, I believe that a lot of characters fall into this category are actually traps, which are usually the Est archetypes. Anything with aptitude is usually not worth the investment because other characters come in already stronger than them. Yeah, if I dump every single stat booster and every single item and every single resource into this person, are they going to be fantastic? Maybe. And that's the worst part. It's a maybe. But even if they are fantastic, it's not because the unit is good. It's because you invested so much into them. Now imagine taking all those resources and spreading it around the other units that you have that are already strong. Man, you'd have a much easier time. But, of course, to each their own. And this comes to the last part of it. Have fun. Implement stuff from other people. Or come up with strategies of your own. I'm like, oh my god, I would love to warp skip this. Warp skip, kill the boss, whatever. Do that. If that works for you, it works, and that's great. Nobody's going to tell you how to play. This is merely just a guideline of trying to understand how to tackle these higher difficulties. And it involves a lot of understanding the game, understanding the resource management system, understanding if this is a Juggernaut versus player phase, understanding the impact of effective weapons, using your refresher wisely, and paying attention to the actual objective and side missions of the game. I hope that this video really helped you out, and that somehow this helps you understand a little bit more about Fire Emblem and how to tackle these higher difficulties. Do not be afraid. I am confident everybody can succeed at them. Thank you once again. Before you go, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel a lot, and I'll be seeing you guys next time on another chapter of Limited Deployment. Have a good one.